The ending again is quite ambiguous, where you move actually into the photo of Carol. Are we supposed to surmise that perhaps she was abused as a child?
You can do what you want. It's a free country. But don't ever ask me to explain any of my pictures.
The first picture which he's going to make would have to make a great deal of impact. Be sensational, be as sexual as the censors will allow in those days.
Without you for another minute.
As a result of our discussions and my advice in that direction, Roman, in Paris, with Gerard Brach, wrote an outline of what became then Repulsion, which was the story of this mentally disturbed young girl, a manicurist in London.
There was a girl that we both knew who looked tremendously innocent, and then we learned certain things about her which surprised us. And that was somehow the starting point. You know, a girl who looks very innocent and who's got some kind of a mental problem, who is even a schizophrenic and can be dangerous.
Then Roman said, well, he really didn't like it. I said, Roman, it's just fine. It's absolutely fine. Let's go on with it.
We made a date, remember? We're having supper tonight.
Oh, I forgot.
Already in the script, we tried to develop a little bit of psychology, but I had in mind a way of upgrading this film into a psychological thriller, not just a cheap horror film.
I made the rounds with Roman to all the major American production distribution company who were then very active in London, like Columbia, Paramount, United Artists. By that time, Roman already was famous. He's been to Hollywood, was nominated. They all loved to meet him, but no, thank you, no. And went through the English companies, Anglo Amalgamated, British Lion, Associated British, as they were in those days, and still no takers. And so we ended up knocking at the door of Compton Films, which was a small distributors, producers, exhibitors, they had cinemas, dealing primarily in exploitation pictures or soft porno.
And they were looking for somebody like me who could give the group a little bit of respectability or good press for little money.
They came to see me because they had a script for a film which Roman would direct and Gene would produce for me. We haggled over the budget for a little while, and I agreed, we did a deal that they would make the film.
It was a tough deal. We budgeted the film at about £65,000, which to them was the most expensive film they've ever wished to make.
The budget was one which I felt we could cope with. I committed myself, and I felt this was a film had to be made. It was too good to turn away.
Poor little girl. All by herself.
I saw a couple of films shot by Gil Taylor, particularly Dr. Strangelove, and I thought it was fantastic. And the look of the picture was extremely important for me.
And he liked the feel and texture of what I was doing. And that was the first thing he said when he met me. He said, "How do you get these lovely, warm, strong shadows?" I think that I diagnosed it absolutely top-weighted of him being something special we should encourage, especially after Knife in the Water.
Gil Taylor saw Knife in the Water and said yes immediately. Compton didn't because of his salary.
They wanted somebody else about half the price, and he stuck out and said, "I did it." And that was wonderful because I learned so much from Roman.
I said, Compton Techley, don't they? Isn't that a soft porn picture house in Compton Street? And he said, yes, it is. The people who are financing and are organizing the picture own that movie house. So I said, okay, what's the story? Is it a soft porn movie? And he said, no, not at all. It's a horror movie. And I said, well, that might be interesting. None of the people I were working with knew how girls who shared a flat lived. They were all married, and a bunch of old buggers, as far as I was concerned. I mean, who were old enough to be my father, with the exception of Roman. And the ones who weren't old enough to be my father had been married for sort of 20 years or so, and had never been into the flat of two girls who live in Kensington. And this hit me when I first started talking to Roman, because he wanted to know the style of the flat. So I explained that the kind of girls they were, it'd be an old, what we would call a mansion flat. And particularly had to be a mansion flat because we wanted top shots down into the street and top shots down into the nunnery. But the other thing was the dressing of, how people live, which is the bits and pieces, not just the walls and the architecture, but the bits and pieces and the furniture that they have around them. I started to describe it and I realized I couldn't because they had no idea what I was talking about.
Just because I go out once, there's no need to start sulking. I'm not sulking.
I phoned up various girls who I knew who shared flats in London and said, impromptu, with a stills cameraman, can I come over and visit, just to say hi, maybe have a coffee? I've got a cameraman with me to take some photographs. He wants to take some photographs of your wallpaper. And they say, yeah, come on over. Why does he want to take a picture of the wallpaper? I said, well, art direction. Oh, that stuff. Okay, sure, come on over. So when we arrived at the flat, I'd say to the stills cameraman, when we go in, I'll go to the left with the girl who opens the door. You come in after me and go immediately to the right and go straight into the bathroom. And of course, he would go into the bathroom and it would be full of hanging up sort of ladies' knickers, bras. And the problem was, he said he couldn't take any photographs in the first place. I said, well, for God's sake, pull some of them down out of the way so that you can take a photograph, then put them back up afterwards. He said, all right. And of course, he was disgusted. He was a married man and he lived in Shepperton and had a nice little bijou bungalow. And he'd been there for the last 40 years or whatever. And he just couldn't believe that people live like this. And these were all middle class and some of them upper middle class girls. And he said, it's disgusting the way these girls live. I said, yeah. And he said, the things I've seen in the bathroom. I said, well, to photograph the floor, the ceiling, the wall, the windows, everything, the toilet. Let's have a look at it. But we did about half a dozen flats like that. And we came back and I spread them out for the benefit of Roman and the other people who were interested. And Roman, it was intriguing. He loved it. He thought it was absolutely wonderful.
You filthy bitch.
I'm sorry. Who is this?
Who is this? Who is this? Who do you think, you filthy little tart?
Catherine was not very well known yet. It was not like getting a star that would allow you to sell the picture all over. Compton had a list of proposals which I didn't want to hear of because I thought that Catherine was just right for the part.
I mean, she's not only one of the most beautiful girls I've ever photographed. She's beautiful. And a very talented young lady, and she knew it, and she tried to force this on Roman several times, but she couldn't do it because nobody can. He wears you down. And it brings you to tears and back. But you do it in the end, his way.
Catherine was fantastic. I have only good memories of working with her. It was like a tango, She wanted me to direct her. There was no animosity that sometimes you develop with actors, mainly with men, because you just tell them what to do, you see. And man has his pride. It's easier with women in general, but because they just don't care. They don't have these ego problems that male actors have sometimes.
She was absolutely faultless. She did everything Roman asked her to do, I think, except undressing.
She had this problem, she wanted to wear panties under the nightgown, then you could see through the nightgown. Sometimes you could see a little bit of body through it. But, it's normal, a normal reaction.
time we were looking for something to make it look odd, and if it didn't look odd, we would change the setup until it did look odd.
I wanted to have the feeling of the distance increasing throughout the picture as the madness was taking over, or rather overwhelming the girl. I wanted to have the feeling of great perspective, and for that reason I was decreasing the focal length of the lenses to have a wider and wider angle. But with the wide angle lens you come close if you want to have a tight shot, and if you come close you distort the face.
The only way I could get this breaking up of the texture of the face was to use an 18mm right on top of her nose, which made it look a bit crazy.
And Gil didn't want a leading lady's face distorted.
I hated that. We can't do a beautiful girl like that. And I used to say to Roman, I don't like this at all. He used to say, oh, get on with it.
It didn't matter to me. What was important was the impression that you get from the scene. But also I wanted the set to transform.
Roman had this idea that among things to distort would be the set itself, and to make these narrow corridors terribly wide and leave the furniture in the middle of the room but extend the walls, which rather took me back a bit. I didn't fight against it. I thought I just have to try and keep up with it.
I had a very good crew, and I think the crew liked me because I remember once going over the agreed time, and I could see the production managers getting paler and paler from minute to minute, and nobody said a word. And they told me afterwards that it was absolutely unusual.
His attention, his focus, I found it very exciting and quite exhausting, because he never gives up and never lets go.
And if you enthuse about his enthusiasm, you have a little Wonder Man there who's will turn out quite startling things. I had almost the same feeling on the Hitchcock movie, because these people are few and far between that have this magnetism, this enthusiasm. In fact, I can honestly say that it's the one movie where I loved going in the morning and I hated going home at night, and I didn't like weekends off. That's how much I got into this.
I think we are having rabbit.
Rabbit? Oh. I thought they'd all been killed off.
For the rabbit scene, just before we started the movie, he put a rabbit in a fridge and turned the electricity off. And on the day of doing this kitchen scene, she opens the fridge and about 1 million flies fly out. I couldn't believe it. I said, we should infect the whole of Twickenham with some terrible disease from these flies. This is true. And we stuck with this. We worked on this for the morning, but it was impossible. The smell was so awful that we eventually got the rabbit the props had made instead of. But that's what Roman did. I mean, Roman is a strange man. He wanted this for real, so he did it.
What the hell's this? No wonder you look ill if you have things like this hanging around.
Since it was a cheapo production, we didn't have a special effect man. We just had a prop man who would have to help us with creating certain special effects.
What I did was I got the production bio and told her to go to a condom factory, Durex, and get me and test the rubber there by shoving her hands through it and get me large sheets of it. And I had a frame made up, and we stretched it over that and shoved our hands through it from behind, and lo and behold, it worked.
There was a bit of an argument about how many hands were actually needed. And we asked Gene Grotowski, and he said, no, Polanski wants exactly as it is.
Idiotic fight with 10 circumstances, the 12 hands are just as good as 24, which was, was an artistic issue,
Then Klinger then said, well, okay then, I'll find another director. That made Polanski come to terms. I think he lessened by 3 or 4 hands. It was a token thing, and everybody was happy.
When Carol hits the boy on the head, I have always imagined that it happens just as he looks through the peephole. And I wanted to have a subjective shot of what he sees. He sees the neighbor with the dog on the other side of the landing, and then the hit, and the whole thing sort of swivels, and we see a few drops of blood on the door as he falls down. That subjective shot required a very big peephole, because you can't shoot through a real one, and therefore very big door.
And I built a peephole glass the size of a ship's porthole.
He prepared all that was necessary to have the drops of blood, which would be in right proportion to the peephole, like this. That means that the drops had to be about 6 inches long. And that could be done only with this, with a motorcycle pump.
There was another scene when Catherine cuts up the landlord.
It was going to be shot first thing. They'd sent the taxi for her, and it had been delayed. It wasn't her fault. The taxi was delayed in traffic. It was traffic time. Polanski started to speak to her in French. The little French I know, I believe there were some swear words there as well. She just stood there, and the whole crew was standing there waiting to shoot, and he just carried on, telling her off in French. And eventually, she blew her top. You could see, you see her face go into anger, to extreme anger. He then put the razor in his hand. He said, "Now go kill the landlord." I do know that during his time he worked with us, he was the most unusual form of direction. He was a brilliant man, completely dedicated to the work he was doing, and not easy to get on with, because he had to have things his way.
We went over budget right from the beginning and behind the schedule. It was so tight that it was totally unrealistic.
I know the film went over budget, and there were quite a few harsh words said about that.
Roman was continuously in trouble with them over his... He took a long time to line up. He wanted to get everything absolutely right, and it did appear to them that he was taking too long to line up. It wasn't taking too long, but they thought it was.
But a lot of producers don't seem to understand, or a lot of filmmakers don't understand, that you can't just expect 1 take or 2 take or 3 take movies. In terrible television shows, films for television, of which I've made many, you hear producers saying, this director's wonderful, 3 takes is his maximum. What it means is he doesn't give a shit.
And I had to go to and talk to them rather strongly, and tell them how important, how wonderful these movies were going to be.
If you're going to have something worth showing, go for it. So the number of takes, anybody who whinges and moans about that, shouldn't be in the film business, or shouldn't have hired a quality director.
You never achieve anything if you do it half-cock.
There were a lot of things that I couldn't do the way I wished, simply because I didn't have physical means to do it, because I didn't have enough time, because I didn't have enough money. So I just got used to the fact that that's how it is.
We agreed on a budget because as in the way running a cinema and a small distribution company, we kept our costs down to a minimum. And the budget for this film, we expected the film not to exceed that budget because it was stretching us.
They were not a big company. If I make fun of them and talk about certain shortcomings, it doesn't mean that I didn't appreciate giving me chance and that they were not good to me. I like them very much, both.
Roman did the cut, and we were all very keen to see it. And we were all assembled in this viewing theatre. The film was shown, and the lights came up. And there was total silence. And Roman misunderstood this silence. And he stood up and said, "Put it down to youthful indiscretion." And Peter Sellers' agent stood up and said, "May you produce lots of youthful indiscretion. That's the most amazing piece of film I've ever seen in my life."
I wouldn't touch her. Don't touch her.
To me, it was interesting that Roman initially felt unsure himself.
No other film has ever shown with such intense reality the terrifying journey into madness.
The censorship was very strict in Britain then. The censor was John Trevelyan, and he was tough, but he loved movies at the same time. And he also had an advisor who was a psychiatrist. He showed him the film when we submitted it to the censor, and he was very impressed with the film and said that from a psychiatrist's standpoint, it was absolutely right. I remember he asked what kind of research we did with Gerard Brash. We didn't do any research.
Taking you inside the mind of a girl driven to insanity.
Picture up into absolutely rave reviews. In England and in America, everywhere in Europe, but in America particularly.
Well, it was during the time of the Berlin Film Festival, and it was announced as the winning. And my partner, bless his soul, he's dead now. He always used to go and collect the things, and I believe his family still have the actual silver bear.
Because Michael Klinger collected and said, "Well, bring it to you, boys." Of course, didn't. Never turned it over, and kept it. Basically stole it.
I thought I'd seen everything. This is a flaming nut house.
Well, the surprise was that the film was very well received and started making money. So Compton people were happy, and they said, "Let's do a next one."